congregation of the Wellesley Village Church has worshiped on this spot for over 225 years. Over those generations, the congregation has maintained their building and taken environmental stewardship seriously, as you can see by the solar panels on it. But now it's time to replace the aging oil-fired heating and ventilation system with a geothermal system. It'll replace the 7 rooftop units you can see as we're passing there with 3 rooftop units, and a field of 18 geothermal wells will heat and cool via heat pumps the building. Today, our local company, Skillings, is setting up to drill the first well. The design for this geothermal system plans to use up to 18 wells. They're each 850 feet deep, about 8 inches in diameter. The wells will be drilled through the driveway that goes around the church, so it will not disturb the church grounds. The whole purpose of drilling this first production well in December, which is well in advance of the other 17 wells that will be drilled next May, is so that we are sure we understand the geological conditions underneath the church. Where is the bedrock? Is there water? And so forth. And we will actually measure the heat transfer capability of one of the production wells, so that from that we can calculate how many wells and how deep they have to be to heat and cool the building. We may not need 850 feet for 18 wells. We may need less. First step is to set up the rig so we can see the truck's in place up on its hydraulic stand, so it's nice and stable, and they're erecting the tower. Towering up, as they say in the drilling business. The water and ground rock, called tailings, will come out of the well and go into these 2 bins, one for excess water and one for tailings. Oh, and there's my co-chair, Kathy Schleier. Kathy and I have been working on this project, I think, for most of our lives, so we're really glad to see. So at this point, they've drilled down about 40 feet, which went through 30 feet of overburden, loose rock and gravel before bedrock. And we're into bedrock. So a casing, a steel pipe has been sunk. That's what you see there. And a wellhead put on top of that casing. The wellhead will capture the tailings, the grindings that come up, and the water that's used to lubricate the bit and direct it to those dumpsters. So we're towering back up and ready to start drilling. This is the drill bit that if you wonder what can bore an 8-inch hole 850 feet into granite, well, this is the device. Probably not something you're going to pick up tomorrow at Green's Hardware. So now we have our drill bit. It's lifted by its own crane up into the tower, and then they'll lower the drill bit down into the casing, clamp it, and attach a drill pipe to it. So this is how they connect the sections together. There'll be 45 sections of 20-foot drill pipe to get us down 850 feet. So imagine 45 of those pieces of pipe. And you can see they just screw it on. Up above, the white device you see there is the hydraulic motor that drives the drill. It actually rotates it. It also is the place where water and air are injected into that drill pipe. The water cools the drill bit, and the air pushes the tailings back up to the surface. Here, the team just finished adding a new 20-foot section of drill pipe. A carousel swings over the hydraulic motor up above. There, the white thing, it screws into the drill shaft. The shaft then screws into the existing piece of pipe. It's held in place by a clamp. When it's unclamped, down it goes back into the well, and we start our next 20 feet of drilling. So we're here on New Year's Eve for our last day of boring the first well. We're at about 800 feet, approaching 850 feet, which will be the end. You can see the drill shaft turning there. Remember that besides driving the drill bit, that shaft pushes water to cool the bit and air down the shaft, which then blows the tailings up this hose and through this cyclonic separator into the dumpster. And you can see the tailings and water separating out in this dumpster will be taken for proper disposal. The tailings are like very fine gravel, almost sand. So the granite gets ground up pretty well. And if we look up the rig, up the tower, you can see the drill head up there. And if you watch closely, watch the white motor against the frame that's behind it. And you'll see the white drill motor is slowly moving downward. And that's the rate that we're able to drill this rock. Turns out that they can do about 1.5 feet per minute, 1.5 feet per minute. So you can say it takes a while to drill an 850-foot well. As our drill team is finishing up the last well, the truck has arrived with the reel of tubing. You can see it's a double tube, each are 1.5 inches in diameter, and they're joined at the end that'll go to the bottom of the well. That's a sideways joint so the water can flow freely between the two tubes, down one tube and back up the other tube, and that's how we get our geothermal energy out of the ground. So now the team is unreeling off the drum the tubing, both legs, the up and the down leg, into the well casing. You see all that's left after all that drilling is just that piece of well casing sticking up. And that'll even at the end be cut off and be down under the asphalt. You won't even know the well is there. They'll get the tubing in today on New Year's Eve, and they'll come back after New Year's and fill this entire 850-foot pipe with a mortar so that there's good thermal conductivity between. It'll be a solid column of mortar and rock and tubing, so there's good heat transfer between the rock and the fluid in the tubes. So if they pour it the day after New Year's, they'll wait 5 days for the concrete to cure. Concrete's an exothermic reaction, so it generates heat when it cures. They have to let that all dissipate, and then they'll measure the actual heat transfer, how many BTUs per hour we can get out of each well, from which we'll determine how many wells we need and how deep they have to be. We're back now on January 2nd, and what we see here is the two tubes coming out of the well that are cut off. Those are the production tubes. They'll take the coolant down, back up. The third tube that's being taken off the reel and put down the well is a tube we're going to use to pump the thermal grout down that will completely fill the well from the bottom to the top. So it'll be a solid column. Now we've started pumping the grout down that tube to the bottom of the well. You can see as the thermal grout is filling from the bottom, it's pushing the water up and out of the casing. And we'll pump this casing completely full of that grout to the top and then let it sit for 5 days so we can do the thermal testing. So there has to be some factoids out of this whole thing in terms that all of us can understand. So here's my attempt at putting it in terms for real people. First of all, the total length of our tubing that's in these 18 wells is going to be almost 6 miles. That means that's the equivalent of drilling an 8-inch hole through solid granite from the location of our church in Wellesley to the center of downtown Framingham. Imagine that. The depth of each well is more than 4 times the height of our steeple. So just imagine the church as you're looking at it, and imagine 18 wells around it going down 4 times more than the height of our steeple. That's quite an engineering achievement. It's now January 8th, 2025, and our mortar thermal grout in the well has cured and equalized with the bedrock, so we can test the thermal capacity of the well. You can see the 2 production pipes coming out and going to the test rig, which is powered by the white generator that sits behind the rig. It's actually pumping the coolant down the leg and back up and measuring how much thermal energy we can extract from the well. The coolant that's used is primarily water with about 18% non-toxic antifreeze, and that's what will cool the production system. So from this, we can calculate how many wells we're going to need and how deep they need to be. So that wraps up the creation of our first production well. We hope that you'll join us in May 2025, when we'll spend about a month drilling the remaining 17 wells of the field and connecting them up to the total HVAC system. We hope to see you then. Thank you very much from the Wellesley Village Church.